As is the case when it comes to, all kinds of photography gear really, and especially when it comes to lenses, you don't ever really need anything, but if you are in the market for your next prime lens and you don't really know what to get, then one that I can really recommend and have found myself using a lot more often, especially in the last 4 years or so, is the 24mm. And if I had to just pick one focal length in terms of what I think does it all pretty well, I think that's the 24mm more so than just about any other focal length. I've shot everything on the 24mm. I've shot architecture, street photography, lifestyle, portraits, right? I've even shot cars with it, landscapes, everything. And so in this video, I want to show you how I've been using the 24mm focal range and what I love the 24mm lenses for. Now, the first reason is that I love it as a walk around lens. One of the main things that a lens needs to have to become one of my favorites is versatility, bang for your buck, being able to get the most out of a single tool. And I think that that tool is the 24mm lens because, you can shoot almost anything. I think it's a fantastic walk around lens in situations where, you want to travel light and you only want to bring one body and one lens along with you, especially on travel, because I find that, I can shoot almost any style of photography with this lens, and I've shot, so many landscapes on this lens. I've shot cityscapes. I've shot lots and lots of portraits on this lens, but more on that in a moment. I've shot lifestyle, tech, street photography. Hell, I remember once I even did a commercial car shoot at Fuji Raceway with the 24mm, which was really, really fun. This lens can really do it all. So I find that I'm always bringing this lens because of how versatile it is. And even though I do love my 35mm, which is a pretty close enough, I guess, focal length, there's definitely differences between the two. However, for me and my setup, if you've got a higher resolution camera and you absolutely love the 35mm focal length like I do, then you can actually punch in quite easily on the 24 and frame up your shots just like you would with a 35. The Sony A1 and the A7R Mark IV that I use both have an APS-C crop-in feature, which essentially turns my 24 f1.4 G Master lens into a 36mm f2.1, which is more than good enough for most things, honestly. I actually find that I use this feature all the time, and it's so nice to have all of the versatility of something wide and then something just a little bit more punched in on a singular lens, but also one that is half the size of an equivalent zoom. If you're even more considerate about size and weight though, the 24mm always has a lot of options and they come in very, very, very small form factors sometimes. Another lens that I would recommend as a good walk around lens is the 24mm f2.8 G lens. It's almost like a pancake style kind of lens, but it's designed for travel and it's sharp, it's super tiny, and it's very, very light. At just 162 grams, it is lighter than my phone. You'll barely notice that it's there. Another reason is contextual portraits. So aside from being a great walk around lens for me, one of the main reasons that I find myself gravitating towards the 24mm so much, especially my prime f1.4 G Master one, is for contextual portraits. And when it comes to portraits, for me personally, I tend to actually prefer the more contextual, wide, environmental style portraits over the closer stuff. And I find that even though, if I'm using an 85, for example, I tend to still go a little bit further away and bring a little bit more of the context in. Now that's just me and my personal style, my personal preference, but I find that including more context into a portrait, especially if it's a good context, right, can really enhance the feel and the mood of an image and really help bring that person to life. And it actually allows you to do some really interesting and creative things with your compositions as well. I've shot a lot of contextual portraits at this focal length. And like anything else, sure, there are drawbacks to using the 24mm as a portrait lens. Things like you can't get close because at a certain distance, you'll actually start to distort the face, which doesn't look that flattering in a portrait. And you also have to watch out just for distortion in general across all categories of photography, especially around the edges, because at 24 millimeters, that's where it's starting to get wide enough where things like perspective distortion can become issues if you aren't careful. But for the most part, once you've learned how all of that works and you've gotten used to it, you can easily work around these issues and start to bring in more environment into your portraits. And this can be a super fun and very different way to just shooting regular headshots or waist up portraits, for example. Now, another reason is about seeing the world with this field of view, with the 24 millimeter field of view. Every single lens requires some level of getting used to over a period of time, right? You need to train your mind and train your vision to be able to see the world at a particular focal length. For example, in my opinion, it's actually much harder to train your vision to be always on the lookout for a long, distant, compressed 200 millimeter image than it is a 24 millimeter image, for example. I find the 24 millimeter focal length to be the most approachable in terms of how to practice your vision and how to envision the composition and the field of view in your mind first before even pulling out your camera and taking that photo. At least for me anyway, the reason for that might have to do with our phone cameras. We all use our phone cameras so much all the time, and all of the major phone cameras across all of the main phone brands have their main cameras very close to 24 millimeters. The main camera on the iPhone, for example, is 26 millimeters, and it has been for quite a long time. And 26 is just a little bit narrower than the normal field of view of a 24 millimeter lens, but it's close enough. And you use this field of view so often that you have so many opportunities to practice seeing the world with this or a very similar field of view. And I think that's great because when everyone is moving more towards 24 millimeters as their base focal length, it means that when you go and use a proper, decent camera at that focal length, your images can become ever so slightly easier to understand as a viewer, because most people would, at the very least, subconsciously resonate with that field of view. But of course, one could also say the opposite and say that to stand out, you could also use something else. But that is another topic for another video. One last thing I love about the 24 millimeter focal range, just in general, is that there are just so many different options to be able to use 24 millimeters. It's so easily accessible, which for me makes it very worthwhile learning as a field of view to commit to memory. Of course, you can just use your phone to get close to 24 millimeters, as I previously mentioned, but you can also find 24 millimeters in so many different zoom lenses. For me, if I've got a zoom lens on, I find that I'm using 24 millimeters on my 16-35 G Master, which, as a little bit of a side note, is great because that's also the point where it's the most sharp in the range. But I'm also using it on my 24-70 G Master as well. And there are a ton of other zoom lenses that you can get as well if you're looking to get into this focal range and really understand it. Lenses like the 16-35 G Power Zoom, the 12-24 G Master or the G, and the 24-105, and then all of the APS-C equivalent lenses you can also get in that range as well. Then on the prime side, of course, you could just go straight up to the cream of the crop with the 24mm f1.4 G Master. But if you don't want to splash that amount of cash, or maybe size and weight are more important to you, then you could also go with the aforementioned 24 f2.8 G, or the older Sony Zeiss 24 f1.8, or the Zeiss Batis 25 f2. Or all of the other plethora of third-party lenses in this focal length. It's such a commonly used one that there's a lens at any budget range, size, and weight for everyone. And this isn't just for the Sony system either. This kind of lens versatility stretches across all of the big manufacturers and big camera brands. It's just an amazingly flexible focal length to get yourself into. So, do you own one? Do you want to own one? Let me know in the comments below and let me know what your experiences are with this very amazingly flexible focal length. And also let me know if you enjoyed this video and what focal length I should do next. I haven't done that much gear talk on this channel, so we've got a lot to work with here. All right, I'll see you in the next video, but until then, get out there and make something that matters. Peace.